Good morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We'll try to kickstart this thing. The old fella's having a little trouble waking up this morning. Went down to the honor flight last night and got home late. And again, for kudos, by golly. I'm going to make this a personal kudo to Aaron and Joyce Leisman. They're kind enough to take me down when the honor flight occurs. And their son Adam is in charge of the flight from the time it leaves Springfield until the time it gets back. And for those of you who don't know where the honor flight is, if you don't know, call 648-5510, and I'll be happy to spend the next 45 minutes telling you about it.
That leaves us out, doesn't it?
It's a great thing for veterans. And this happens to be the day that we have people who know what's going on with the Veterans Assistance Program here. So let's get right on with business here, Judith Kay.
Well, our guest today is Mr. Dan Benedict, and that is his job, and that is the capacity in which he is here, the Veterans Assistance Commission. And we're happy to have you with us this morning, and maybe we should just start at the beginning. I know you have a relatively new program about dental help for veterans, and give us kind of a little Reader's Digest version, if you can, of Veterans Commission, please.
All right. Basically, we started a pilot program with SIU Dental out at the health department, and what we had started was a program for honorably discharged veterans to get their teeth cleaned once a year, and they'd only have a $25 copay out of their pocket. We've been fortunate enough to expand that now to where there's a $0 copay. So
can't beat that, can you?
If you do not have dental insurance and you're an honorably discharged veteran, you can come see me at the Dr. John Logan building, the tax assessor building, but on the front side of it, and get a voucher. Bring your DD-214, show me that you served and you have an honorable discharge, and I can get you a voucher for a free cleaning. And if there's any other work that has to be done, say you have cavities or need some more extensive work, you can work that out with them. But as far as the cleaning and getting your teeth checked, it's free of charge.
Well, that's good news to the veterans, I'm sure, because there ain't nothing cheap anymore.
That's true.
This goes back. This position that you fill, Mr. Benedict, goes back to the end of the Second War. I remember when I came home from Europe, and a fellow named A.J. Berryhill had an office in the courthouse, first floor of the courthouse. That's where the first floor courtroom is now. Anyway, it was a veterans office, and that's a long time ago. So now Mr. Benedict is in charge of Veterans Affairs. Tell us a little bit about the scope of your job, Dan, because you serve a great need for, I think, a lot of people.
Okay, and just to go along with what you said, we've had kind of a void with veteran services in Logan County for quite some time, since that vacancy out there at the courthouse. We have been fortunate enough to have the Illinois Department of Veteran Affairs send an employee twice a month out to the Oasis. But again, that's just every other week on Tuesdays. So there were limited services, but now that I'm filling the capacity of a veteran service officer for Logan County, they're 5 days a week from 8:30 to 4:30, and I'm there to help veterans with pretty much anything veteran related, whether it be trying to get health care, trying to get signed up for the veteran VA health care, whether they're trying to claim a disability that happened while they're in service, if they're trying to get a non-service connected pension, if they are trying to locate records and medals, I help with that. We'll send off for if they've lost their discharge paperwork, we can send off for that. If they've lost their medals, or if family members come in and say, you know, Grandpa passed away 10 years ago, and we were just going through his stuff, and we saw that he's supposed to have all these medals, and we don't have any of them. We can send off for that. I can help with getting burials set up in the national cemeteries. We have Camp Butler just down in Springfield. Kind of help with that. Replacement headstones for government-provided markers for graves. If they're not legible anymore, you can get a replacement. Or if you have a loved one that was a veteran and was buried and never received a headstone and the family couldn't afford it, then we can get one provided at government expense.
That's just a kind of open the page of the book a little bit. Just a smattering of what you perform as far as services.
Correct. VA home loan, certificate of eligibility, GI Bill. That's my job, to be a source of information and a source of help, basically, for all things veteran.
You're kind of the red tape cutter, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
I try.
Yes.
I do my best, yes.
Do you think most veterans are aware that there are this many services that they could take advantage of?
I would say most veterans are not aware. For varying reasons. You have a lot of the Vietnam veterans that had a very negative experience coming back, just shied away from anything
that has to do
veteran-related.
with is connected with their time of service.
Right. So you have a lot of those veterans that just, anything veteran-related just shied completely away from. And, unfortunately, they missed out on a lot of different services that they qualified for during the years afterwards. So I'm there trying to help them get the benefits that they earned. These aren't anything that's just given to them. They went and fought for their country. The lawmakers said, you've earned these services, and they're there for them. And a lot of times I get told by veterans, well, I never came in because I felt like I was taken away from somebody that needed it more. And I tell them, that's exactly the opposite of what you're doing. The more services that are needed, the more that the VA and the government will provide. Basically, if the government doesn't see a need, they're not going to put services in a community. So the more veterans we have coming forward that need health care, that are having disability problems, that's the community that the government's going to see a need and start putting resources. As you see, we just got the VA clinic in Bloomington. Why did we get that? Because we have more veterans signing up for VA health care. They're not going to put a clinic in Bloomington unless there's a need. So we've got enough veterans signed up that they saw a need. So now we've got a brand new state-of-the-art VA clinic. It provides the basic family doctor type care in Bloomington. It's going to open here just shortly, I believe. I don't have the exact date, but it's early November.
Not that long ago. I opted, when I got that information from the VA, and I opted to just stay down in Springfield. I've been very happy down there.
Yes, we have a Springfield clinic, Peoria Clinic, Decatur.
At the VA, they're on the south side of Springfield.
Yep.
And I've been very satisfied down there through the years. Happily, my needs are not big.
Right.
My actual needs are just minimal. So, I'm very grateful for that.
And it's like a family-like clinic.
Yes, it is.
And that's a good segue into something I'd like to talk about. I spoke to the director of Danville, Ileana Healthcare, and their lease is running out. As you know, you've been there. They're like in a little strip mall next to a Cracker Barrel. It's maybe not the most normal setting for a medicine clinic, being in a little strip mall. So they're actually looking for other places. And, of course, I mentioned we have LDC in Lincoln that has some buildings that are ready to go. He actually came through. He was going from Bloomington to Springfield, and he drove through that area. And I need to get back in touch with him. But I know the director of Ileana Healthcare did drive by and look at LDC.
Could you expand upon that at all? Because that's just such a darn waste out there.
Is.
And those buildings, of course, are just deteriorating from day to day.
Right.
Bill Dennis's big complaint. I tried to clean up my language. That's his big complaint.
Right. There's a lot of frustration.
And he's frustrated. I mean, he rightfully.
Yes.
And I mean rightfully is frustrated. And as all of us should be, because that's just a big tax burden to the state of Illinois out there. And they built those 4 buildings out there.
Right after it closed, they built it because the contract was already...
Spent a lot of money.
Right.
Now, I know that one of them is being well used because that's our associate Supreme Court Justice, Appellate Court Justice John Turner, local boy, made good here.
Yeah.
But the waste out there on
Right.
861 South State Street is just incredible.
And they're beautiful buildings. They've been maintained. The only thing I'll give the state kudos on is how they maintain them. Their caretaker out there did a great job. He would have the heating, air conditioning set up to where it exercised correctly, and the buildings were maintained very well, and that's where they sit in pristine condition, ready to be used for over the past decade.
Illinois is rather famous or infamous, however, for waste, government waste. We seem to have a little issue.
You might be right about that. Maybe that could be an all morning story. Instead of a 9 o'clock, we might be going to 12:30 or so. Still talking about that. The fact that you're here, Mr. Benedict, I think I'm correct in that, is primarily due to the benefits of a fellow veteran, Joe Shaler.
Oh, yes.
He worked real hard to get this office opened up. And I think all of us veterans should give a snappy salute in Joe Shaler's direction.
Yes.
Because he worked really hard at that.
He was instrumental in him and his wife in getting the word out. And they went to all the organizations, all the civic organizations, and told the story and sold the story of how we need to help the veterans and how there's been basically a black hole of services and information for the veterans on what's available. As you said, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and let's face it, people are not educated on all the services that are available. You know, no one just drops a book off at your house. Here's everything that's available to you. So that's where people like me, you know, when I was hired because of Joe and a great number of other people who got the word out, and the taxpayers voted for a levy, which funded my position. And so, yes, Joe Shaler was extremely instrumental in getting that going, and my hat's off to that gentleman.
Yeah, we owe him a debt of gratitude and a snappy salute in his direction. You have your office is open daily. Do you have a steady or sporadic call of veterans who come to see you with problems? Some real, some imagined.
Well, I would have to answer that question with a resounding yes.
Yes. And what did he say?
We have a steady flow of traffic. I would say that the most steady clientele would be people coming in that are reaching retirement age and looking to get some health care from the VA. So that would be the steadies. The more sporadic are the people that come in. You know, I was injured while I was in the service 10 years ago, and I've always meant to go in there and see what I could get as far as like compensation or health care for a ailment.
So we have a veteran, the son of a veteran who's one of our sponsors. And so we probably ought to put a snappy salute into our sponsors right now, and then we'll come right back to Viewpoint. Go ahead, Mr. Ash. Right back here live in the studio, WLCN, high on Lazy Row in Atlanta, Illinois. The program is Viewpoint, of course, each Wednesday morning, 8:15 to 0900 hours. Our guest this morning is Mr. Dan Benedict, a Navy veteran himself. But more importantly, Dan is with us today to tell us his job as a commissioner of Veterans Affairs here in Logan County. That's about as high a title as I can come up with, Dan. Dan is it's not a new office. We've always had it, but it certainly was not well served for a number of years. Wasn't served at all, period. And thanks to the efforts of Joe Shaler and a few others, they got together, and we now have a man who serves veterans. His office is in the John A. Logan building, which is on the corner of Kankakee and
McLean.
Yeah. Okay, that's close enough. Yeah.
Right across from the library.
Right across from the library. And if you don't know where the library is, tough rocks.
Yeah.
Joe, or Dan, I mean, you served hitched in the Navy.
Well, the Air Force.
And the Air Force.
But I did work for the Navy. I was on the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln. I was at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
A lot of my years were spent working for the Navy, but Air Force veteran.
You were career military.
Yes, 23 years, 1 month, 20 days.
22 years. You said a little bit ago that there are those veterans who don't want to ask for any help because they think someone may be more deserving. But that's kind of troublesome for me. I appreciate people wanting to take care of themselves, work hard, support themselves. My parents told me that's what you're supposed to do.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
But if you've served your country and gone to... My brother went to Vietnam, and it was not a spa by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know what or whether he gets any assistance from the VA. I don't know that answer. But the thing is, 'tis a noble thing that these men and women do in signing up for the services and serving their country. They don't get rich doing it, right?
That's true. You'll never be rich by joining the military.
They avoid that.
You may
That's
eat three times a day. Not what you want to eat, but you will eat 3 times a day.
Well, that's something. But that's just too bad because they're so entitled to these entitlements by virtue of the fact that they've done this. They've served their country. They've been in places that weren't so darn fun.
Right.
Well, most of us think that, we've been there and done that. Let's get on with living. None of us ever enlisted, or were drafted for that matter, with the idea that we were going to get certain privileges and pleasures at the end of this conflict, whatever the conflict is. But they served their time and they came home and got on with living. And most of them feel that, if they're going to take care of me, that's okay if I have a problem. Now, you talk with gentlemen who have, and ladies, I keep forgetting that we did have ladies even back in the dark ages serving with us. Those folks who served over in Vietnam, which you referred to, Judith, Agent Orange, that was a big headline out of there. Do we still have veterans that have an Agent Orange problem in this day and here in 2019?
Oh, most definitely. A good percentage of my clients are coming in. They're Vietnam veterans, and according to the VA, if you set foot in the country of Vietnam, if your boots were on the ground, and not just the Army and the Marines, but Navy, Brown Water, and now they're working out the details on Blue Water Navy for exposure to Agent Orange. They presume that you were exposed to Agent Orange.
Is that right?
Yes, and with that presumption of exposure, there's a litany of different problems, different ailments that may come up in your lifetime. It may not show up until you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, the different cancers, prostate cancer, diabetes, ischemic heart disease, different skin conditions. There's a whole list of just things that the VA assumes are associated with your exposure to Agent Orange. And they're pretty much automatic, and I'm not going to say with 100% certainty, but automatic presumption to your service in Vietnam. Nothing's 100% with the government, but those are the list of things that they presume are because of your service in Vietnam.
Well, if the word Agent Orange was said to me and I was the doctorate office, I'd sit up and take notice. I was never... Well, in the first place, I was long before I couldn't even spell Vietnam when that was happening. So I don't want to be light about this. Those guys who went to Vietnam, which is one of the worst wars we've had, and had no business being there at all, but that was a different exposure than the men and women who served in my time.
Definitely. If you think about it, the weed killers that you can buy at the big box stores.
Yes.
You buy a little squirt bottle and you squirt it on some grass, and it takes a couple weeks to kill that little piece of grass, if it does at all. This was something that was so nasty, so terrible, that they would spray it from an airplane And a day or two later, all the leaves are dead off the trees. Yeah. All the bushes are dead. All the plants on the ground are dead. A day or two later, you're killing trees, bushes, every kind of tropical plant.
The whole landscape.
Think if you could buy something like that off the shelf at Walmart. Would you want to spray that above your well?
Not so much.
No.
Well, the other thing about the exposure to it, the folks who serviced airplanes carrying that stuff, they were all exposed to that stuff.
Definitely.
Even 2 or 3 drops on your skin, and you could have a serious problem.
Imagine if it can kill a tree in a day. What's that doing to your body? That's why it's so toxic. That's what people need to understand. This, when you say the word Agent Orange, people go, oh, that would just killed some plants. This was some nasty, nasty stuff.
Yeah. You used the terms brown water and blue water. Could you define those terms, please?
In the most general sense, brown water, Navy, you think the coasties, the Coast Guard and the Navy in their patrol boats going up and down the riverways.
Okay.
And when you're talking riverways, you're talking the small rivers in country and also the big deltas where the rivers empty into the ocean. That's the brown water Navy. So basically, you can imagine like our creeks around here, they're all brown from the dirt. Blue water Navy's out in the ocean. It's they're further offshore. And for many years, the VA has said, well, if you were out on the larger ships away from shore, then we're not going to consider you to be exposed for Agent Orange. And there was a big court case that was just overturned, the VA's decision on that. And as far as I know, the VA was going to implement the Blue Water Navy exposure a little bit earlier this year, but I think they're waiting until the first of the year. The dates have moved quite a bit, so it's hard to keep track of as they work out the details on.
Well, that would make quite a difference in the lives of
definitely.
Several people.
Definitely.
648-5510. Our guest this morning on Viewpoint is a gentleman by the name of Dan Benedict, and he's serving the Veterans Commission at, as I said, at the John Logan. That's if I can't identify it any other place, that's where you go pay your real estate taxes.
Yes, they're on one side and I'm on the other.
And so they hit Dan's. So they hit Dan's front door and they want to know why their damn taxes are so high.
Pretty much every day.
But seriously, and this is a serious point, I don't want to be flippant about this at all. There are a lot of veterans who quietly endure their own problems, and sometimes they don't know where to go. So if they go talk with Mr. Benedict, he can kind of help orient them and guide them to the right place to go for help. And another thing Dan does, he'll help you for your final solution. He'll help you to go down to Camp Butler, which is a beautiful. I call Camp Butler the Arlington of Central United States. It's so pretty.
It is.
And
pretty.
I know we have other pretty military cemeteries in this part of the country, but they do a great job down there.
Yes, they do.
I went down not too long ago and walked in the office and go, do you have to see what I could see how she could help me? And I said, well, I'm here to enlist for the duration.
Your final enlistment.
my final military assignment. Yeah. But I don't want to make light of that. That's a very, very nice place to go. And I've thought of that before. I thought about it a long time.
Right.
So what would be the most prominent, if you have the most prominent problem that you have walked through those doors, Mr. Benedict?
I would say, I don't know if it's the most prominent, but I would say one of the most underserved issues that we have for veterans in central Illinois, rural Illinois, is mental health services.
Mental health services.
Mm-hmm. And that's systemic across the United States for all veterans. Mental health incident problems with mental health for veterans is a much higher rate than for civilians.
Is there an age group under which that title would fall, like Vietnam veterans and those fellows that age, or these old gaffers like myself who were in World War II? We limp in and say, I don't know where I am, and I don't want to make light of that. That's a serious problem.
Actually, I would say there is no age demographic to where that I have seen personally. I haven't done scientific studies, but just in my experience, I would say there's no age demographic that is in more need or has mental health issues show up at a higher percentage. I know the older generations there's different social circumstances. There's more stigma tied, so they're less likely to get help. I'm not going to make light of that at all. So you will see the older generations seeking help less, but I wouldn't say there's a difference in the problems that the veterans face. You're just going to see a difference in who's seeking help.
We hear right along on the news about mental health issues and the fact that the need for those services is growing, not only amongst people who've been in the service, but amongst all of us.
Correct.
And do you feel that the service is recognizing this general health problem and gearing up to have more services directed to those people who need it?
We are seeing the VA ramp up services. They have vet centers, which are associated with the VA. They're VA employees paid by the VA, but they're psychologists, social workers who are counseling veterans. There's one in Springfield, there's one in Peoria, and you can go up there and basically get free counseling for any service-related mental problems that you might be facing, PTSD or anxiety. Transitioning
we're lucky
back
here then in Central Illinois because we've got 2 centers.
Right, and what we have here locally in Lincoln, what the VAC has set up with SIU is we actually have free counseling. We have a group meeting that meets every Thursday at 9 o'clock for veterans that want to come and discuss problems, sit and listen. There's donuts, there's coffee. It's free of charge. So we have a group meeting every Thursday at 9 o'clock in the morning at the Logan County Health Building. And that's a free service that we have here.
It's at the health department, did you say? I'm
yes,
sorry.
It's at the health department.
I presume the modus operandi for that is the same like the Alcoholics Anonymous. That's nobody else's business. You're in there to discuss your problem, and those problems stay. As they say, what is said in that room stays in that room, and you don't have to go there if you're feeling like you want to talk, then go there and just do that. If you want to go listen, or if you want to be a mentor, if you like, well, I had a tough time, but I've made it through it, so let me go there and start giving back.
I bet there's a need for people to do that.
Yes, and we do need mentors for our Veterans Court. That's people basically, the Veterans Court is something that was established by state law to help veterans who may be suffering from mental health issues that are finding themselves on the wrong side of the law, usually from self-medication, if you will, alcohol or maybe drugs, and finding themselves in a bad position with the law. They actually have a track that if they can clean themselves up and get help, and they're providing help, counseling and everything else, that maybe they could get the minor offense that they did. This isn't for major offenses, but minor offense expunged from the record or get their sentence reduced.
So it may not be an incarceration issue at all.
Right.
I should think that would be a very important service that you provide, to have a mentor for someone that they can count on and talk to, and won't be judgmental. We'll just help them.
And in Dan's case, it's a veteran-to-veteran type thing. Now, I don't make light of that term, because most of us who have served our flag, we have a good feeling about that.
Right.
And we feel that we can talk perhaps to another veteran and be on the same wavelength.
We have a common bond. We all went through a basic training of some type.
That's why they call it a brotherhood, I think.
That's right. We all wrote that blank check saying that we would give our life for our country at any time. And we all took that very seriously. And we have similar experiences. So it's we have something in common right off.
Mr. Benedict, is your caseload heavy or fairly heavy? How do you define that? How would I define that? I have no idea.
Caseload, when you're...
The number of veterans you see in the course of a week's time.
I wouldn't say it's heavy. Different cases are more complicated. Going back, some cases go back over the years, and I have to pull from the National Archives. Say we have it. I'll give one example. A gentleman hurt his back in the service, but he never went to sick call because, he didn't want his buddies making fun of him.
Yeah.
So he has nothing in his medical records. Well, he hurt his back working on an aircraft, so I have to send off for the maintenance record on that aircraft, or I have to find his buddies that were working with him that knew his back was hurt so they could write a letter. So some of it can be very extensive. You can go back and actually request the logs for ships and aircraft and incident logs through the National Archives. So when it's very hard to quantify the workload. Every case is its own entity, has its own life. Some are very easy. I got hurt, it's in my medical records. You send that off with the forms and the VA comes back and makes their decision. Other ones, well, I don't have any records. What can we do? Well, that's when we have to start doing the
get the
detective work.
checkbook ready. I injured my back jumping out of the cockpit of a P-47, and I forgot it was raining hard, and I slipped and fell off the trailing edge. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not very high, maybe 30-some inches, 4 feet maybe. And I was in traction for 10 days afterwards in Bradley Field, Connecticut. Well, when I came time to get discharged at Camp Grant, I was ready to get out of there. And, of course, they asked me if I was going to have a medical problem. Nope, I'm fine.
Exactly.
Well, dumb kid and anxious to hurry and get home. I probably could be getting a minor check of some sort each month, and I don't care. That's fine. I'm just fine without it. Mm-hmm. But that's as an example of things that can happen to a
right.
veteran.
Exactly, and that's a very good example of, I'm a 20-something, I can get over it.
Yeah.
Well, old age comes knocking on the door. Those injuries are still there.
Turns out I didn't get over it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we all avoid thinking about the fact that if we're still here, we're going to be old,
Exactly.
Because it's not that fun. I had an uncle who flew a fighter plane and was shot down and killed over Germany in the Second World War. Now, if he was my only uncle, and if I wanted to know about his service record, would I be eligible to ask about that? And since you're not only the red tape cutter, but Dick Tracy as well.
Right.
Well, part of our problem is that we had that big fire in St. Louis many years back, burn up a lot of veterans' records.
Yes, that fire burnt for, I believe, over a week. If you can imagine a warehouse stacked, 20 feet tall with densely packed paper.
Packed with papers.
That's like putting out a coal fire.
That's where my traction records are.
But yes, if you are next to kin, you are eligible to send off for the records of your family members. So if you wanted to send off for that, you could do that.
You could.
Yes.
I didn't know whether they had a limit as to how far they'd go. Maybe they'd think a niece wasn't somebody who had a need to know.
It all depends. I mean, does he have children? Are you next to kin? Are you next in line?
Oh, I'm sure I'm not.
In whose line? That's the question.
Right.
Whose line are we talking about?
I mean, as the branches start getting further out, then yes, you want to stay down that main tab.
Well, he was very young, of course, and
Right.
We all were.
He wasn't married. He had no children.
Oh, okay.
So there isn't anybody who would, in that sense, be next of kin. And of course, his parents are gone,
Right. That
My gosh,
sounds like,
I'm 80. My grandparents would be considerably older than me.
I find her a kid. Mr. Benedict, to whom do you report? You're next in the line of duty, stepping up the ladder.
I
There's
report
a table of organization somewhere in this.
Yes.
That starts out in the big the swamp out there in Washington?
Well, I'll start a little bit lower level. I report to the Veterans Assistance Commission board, and the board is made up of members from organizations like the VFW American Legion, Marine Corps League, any of the service organizations that put forth a representative for this board. I report to them. Now, I also provide, we have, since I'm in Lincoln, we have city council that's
Yes.
regularly attending our meetings. We have the county board liaison that attends our meetings. So they're provided the information as well. But I report to the VAC, I'll just use the acronym, board. And we have quarterly meetings as required by statute, and I report the goings-ons and the dealings.
Is there a lot of
VAC.
paperwork that's been designed to create a lot of work for you, Dan, in that regard?
As far as the red tape is and helping with any government entity, there's going to be a great idea. We should do this for somebody, and in my case it's the veterans, and you take these great ideas and you run them through the multitude of lawyers on Capitol Hill, and then you get lots of forms and lots of red tape. So it's my job to cut through all that and to just ask the questions to the veteran and get that information on the forms for them to send in.
Well, anything connect with our government, you know automatically there's going to be a lot of red tape.
Yes.
Most of which can be put in a shredder before it ever leaves the machine. But that's just the nature of the beast in government affairs.
It's a lot of legal requirements.
Yeah. The lawyers write up a lot of ipso factos and TDMs and so forth that we don't know what that's about. Is there any one particular incident that you've had since you've taken this office that would kind of stand out in your memory bank? Or perhaps a more difficult problem that somebody needed served?
One of my, the first thing that popped into my head, and there's several incidences, but one of the first thing that popped in my head was we had a homeless veteran, and he had been traveling the country. It recently came back from overseas. He was homeless, and he was living in a shelter, and helping him collect all his information, collect all his paperwork, and get all that organized and sent in a way that could get him a timely decision. And he was suffering from PTSD, which went along with him being homeless. He had a hard time adjusting. But we were able to, due to his issues and everything else that happened while he was in the service, we got him 100% service-connected disability and back pay of over $300,000.
Oofta.
Oh, boy.
And currently he's getting a monthly check at the 100% disability rate, and he's got medical care. He's not homeless anymore. So his life was completely and utterly
You changed his
turned
life.
around. Yes.
He did a 180, didn't he?
Well, all I did was fill out the paperwork and present it to the VA, and just kind of.
You
Well,
mentioned-
that's probably no mean feat, though.
You mentioned that term PT, post-traumatic stress disorder. And when I was a kid, this was, of course, before World War II, and we talked about the World War I veterans being what they used the word shell shock.
Yes.
Well, that was a modern-day PTSD. And I remember we had a Spanish-American War veteran. The fellow's name was John Wiley. He ran around town peddling the couriers, yelling at the top of his voice, "Courier," and so forth. Well, he was squirrely. But it was that day, PTSD for him.
Right.
And it's pretty difficult to rationalize that. And I don't think anybody can equate themselves with that unless they've had the misfortune of having the experience themselves.
That's correct. And it's
unless
not.
you've walked the shoes, you can't relate to somebody like that.
It's not something you can really even put into words. I am so happy and so thankful that 99% of the American people are so far removed from anything war related that they really don't know what it is that happens to you once you experience the gore, the nastiness. When you see human nature, which you had no idea human nature could be a certain way. I am so thankful that people aren't aware of that, but I'm also saddened because they're not aware of just how deeply it affects people that have been through those experiences.
Yeah, that's it's another world. Once you put that uniform on, I don't care whether it's the Air Corps or the Air Force in these days. Sorry about that. That's an old timer. Or the Navy or the Coast Guard or whatever. If you wear the uniform of our country, it's going to change you one way or the other.
Right.
And happily, in my judgment, most people are changed for the better.
Yes, I would say so. This sense of pride, the sense of duty, serving your country, knowing that you're working for the greater good. You're part of a big team all working towards one goal. I'm not saying that it's a picnic, it's human beings like anywhere else, but it's nice having that sense of camaraderie, that brotherhood, as you said. And but the downsides, the nastiness of war that most people just have no idea, without getting into it. Think of the motor pool guy. Well, how could you get PTSD? You worked on trucks. Well, think of that Humvee that got blown up by an IED. Maybe it wasn't completely blown up, but it goes back to the motor pool, and they're scraping out of the bottom of the
body parts.
Yeah,
still in it.
And they've got to mop that up, and that was his best buddy. And now he's putting that in a bag.
Well, as I like to quote the gentleman who enlisted me when I was at the University of Illinois in the big armory building over there on the campus, and this Clapton McClintock was his name. And when I dropped my hand down after taking the oath, he said, "Well, son, you're ours now." I was a raw kid at the time, obviously, and I had no cognizance of what he meant. And shortly thereafter, I found out what he meant. Dan Benedict, we appreciate you spending your time with us this morning. Before we quit on talking about Veterans Affairs, once again, the Eminence Christian Church up there on 2500, we're 2250 here at Lazy Row. They serving Veterans Breakfast this November the 16th. Up there, and those kind folks from that church do a great job for us. I've been to these breakfasts before, and so November the 16th, they're going to have that breakfast up there, and we really need for somebody to let them know if you plan to go. So I'll give you this number to call Marcia Fernandez, 361-4912, and you're a few days after her self-imposed deadline, but they'd sure like to see you up there. Danny Benedict, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.